It's good to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy. Back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew version 1.0 decklist, so the commander in front of us, and my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. So I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider checking out those links down below. I'd appreciate it. But today, we're still rocking through Final Fantasy content. And I knew eventually I would get around to this commander, but it looks like Final Fantasy made that decision for me, as we got Atraxa Grand Unifier as Sephiroth, the Savior. Um, I will say off the rib that the deck is carrying a little bit of an extra cost just due to this version still being a more expensive version of Atraxa than the regular one. So I imagine some people are going to build this because of Sephiroth, and that's the case. Then the deck is going to cost this much, but you only care about Atraxa, the deck's going to cost a little bit less. But Atraxa is a 7 mana, 4 color commander, every color but red. 7/7 Phyrexian Angel. We've got Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, and Lifelink. And whenever Sephiroth enters, we're going to reveal the top 10 cards of our library. And for each card type, we can put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into our hand and put the rest on the bottom of our library in any order. A couple things to note with this ability. If you have a card that has more than one type, you can choose it for any of the types. So I could, if I had an enchantment creature, I could choose that as an enchantment and then get another creature. It's important to note that for each of the types, you're choosing a card. And so this can work out in your favor depending on how you want to build it. But how are we going to build it? Well, with a commander that has a great entries ability, especially one that can start just getting value off the top and putting it into our hand, I think Blink makes the most sense. And there's a lot of great Blink creatures. There's a lot of great creatures that care about entering, and we're in the perfect colors for Blink because so many of the popular Blink commanders are in these colors. I think this makes the most sense. And we'll talk about just some combos we can work our way up to caring about these colors and taking advantage of what we have in front of us. All right, well, how do we Blink? I mean, the truth is there's a lot of ways to do it. I think you see commanders like Brago to be the most effective way to blink a lot of things at once. Whenever it hits somebody in combat, you can exile any number of target non-land permanents we control and bring them back in. This is huge because it says non-land permanents, not just creatures, and this means you can blank a lot of other things, like we'll talk about later. Aminatu just lets us on her -1 just blink one thing at a time. Deadeye Navigator can pair with a creature, and then for just 2 mana, you can blink that creature. This is going to lead us to some big mana combos that we'll talk about later in the presentation. Displacer Kitten, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you can blink a non-land permanent. Again, the key wording there is non-land permanent. And again, we'll talk a little bit about why that can be important in a little bit to blink things that could be beneficial for you that aren't creatures. Emiel, though, is another one that can just blink a creature for 3 mana. Again, Emiel is another piece in some very popular ways to make a large amounts of mana. And it just being 3 mana and repeatable makes it a very useful ability, just like Deadeye Navigator. Thassa Deep Dwelling, at the end of your turn, you can just blink a creature and bring it back in immediately. Only goes off at the end of the turn, so we can't farm this. It's only going to go off once, but it's important because I think in the mid to late game, you're going to be able to use this blink to kind of build yourself value as you start going up the chain. We have things like Cloud Shift, Ephemerate, and Essence Flux. These are single target blink spells that are going to happen at the time. Pick the one thing, and it blinks and comes back. I think the other important thing to note about these single target blink spells is that if you have a creature that's being targeted for single target removal, remember all of these blink or flicker abilities are going to protect your creature from that removal. Because remember, when anytime anything targets, if you change that target, meaning if that target leaves the battlefield and comes back, that original target's no longer there, and that thing's going to fizzle. So it's important to note that these can be used defensively. Well, same thing with MEL and Deadeye Navigator. I mean, they can be used defensively. It's just a little bit easier to keep up 1 mana, to take out some of that single target removal. And if somebody's targeting your commander, well, then that's great. We get to blink Sephiroth or Atraxa, however you want to look at it, and get a bunch more value when they come back in. We also have things like Conjurer's Closet and Teleportation Circuit. These are extra copies of that Thassa Deep Dwelling ability. At your end step, blink your creature right away, get that value, and get to stepping. So what do we want to blink? Well, truthfully, there's a lot of approaches at how you want to do this. But I think we want to kind of run the spread on making sure we have a lot of value. Things like Aether Channeler, which can draw your cards to bounce something else back to hand. Baleful Strix comes in and draws a card. Coiling Oracle comes in and lets you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, it comes in tapped or comes on the battlefield. Otherwise, it goes into your hand. So that's kind of nice because you can get lands or technically draw, right? Urtai can come in to destroy something and have its controller draw a card or cancel or counter a spell activated ability or triggered ability. Um, that's a huge one because if we find a way to blink Urtai, it means we can, right? We could be interacting with our opponents. Flicker Wisp, bounce something else. Grey Merchant of Asphodel is a potential win con for us, as whenever it enters, each opponent loses X and we gain X life, or sorry, just loses X life for X of our devotion to black. Meaning if we have enough mana to blink Grey Merchant as many times as we can, as long as we have any devotion to black. Remember, Grey Merchant has at least two. This is a way we could repeatedly, right, have everybody lose enough life to win the game. Masker Worm gives all of our opponent's creatures -2/-2, and then whenever a creature opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. Again, Masker Worm could be blinked to help remove our opponent's board of creatures if we need to. Peregrine Drake is probably one of the most well-known blink targets, and we'll talk about that in a little bit on how we can get almost infinite, basically infinite mana with Peregrine Drake. When it comes in, you untap up to 5 lands. Um, and obviously, as long as you are finding a way to blink Peregrine Drake that costs less than 5 lands, you're going to be netting mana every time. And we're going to be able to just use an arbitrarily large amount of mana for a lot of things. Reflector Mage lets you bounce a creature back to an opponent's hand. They can't cast spells with that same name until our next turn. This is a really fun ability to get things back in your opponent's hand and just lock them down from casting it again, keeping it out of the way and really pushing our opponents back. Shieldred, when it comes in, forces each opponent to sack a non-token creature or planeswalker. So, of course, can only hit non-token creatures, but arguably, those are the ones we want to hit, right? And force them out of the way. And then Shieldred can be flipped to the backside for value. But what I think is important is that Shieldred does that on the ETB. You could flip her, have her come back, or you can blink her, have her come back, and just force that sacrifice on your opponents. Yorion, not as good as something um, like some of our other blinkers, but when it comes in, we can just exile a number of target of other non-land permanents, and then we get him back at the beginning of the next end step. So it doesn't create a loop, like you can't Yorion into other things come back and Yorion. Like you can't loop it, but Yorion can still be very useful to, again, exile any number of things at the same time. So I hope that you can see in your blink things, you have things that can blink a single target, and you have things that can blink many things. And a lot of times when you're blinking many things, those things are going to get delayed. They're not going to be repeatable. And that's okay, but I think it's still beneficial, especially as we go up the power level on this deck. We start adding better and better things that we can blink for our benefit. Things like this become a whole lot more useful. But I think as much as we want things that we want to bling, we also want things that care about other things entering. I thought something like Corpse Knight. Whenever another creature we control comes in, each opponent loses a life. Well, here's an outlet over the course of a game to deal some damage to our opponents. Alice Norn doubles up all our ETBs and prevents all our opponents' ETBs from triggering. A huge ability that could really shut some decks down if they're not ready for it. Galadriel lets us have one of each of 3 abilities once per turn. Add triple green, put a counter on each creature we control, scry 2 and draw a card. So every turn we can hit all 3 of these once and just build ourselves some value as we, blink our creatures or have things coming in. Soul Herder says whenever a creature is exiled from the battlefield, you put a counter on it, and then at the beginning of our end step, we can have something flicker. Again, Soul Herder can grow as we're blinking our creatures. Yurok again doubles up our ETBs from permanents coming in. Same thing with Panharmonicon, but only for creatures or artifacts. Whereas Yurok can double up things like lands, but in our deck, mainly just doubling up creatures coming in. And here we're just trying to get more and more and more and more value every time we do things with what we have. Same thing, Virtual Knowledge doubling up. Same thing with Rock's ability doubling up. And then my thought was something like Cathar's Crusade could help us close the gap. As we're having creatures come back in again and again, we're putting counters on our thing and making real threats. Remember that Atraxa does have flying, meaning that there is a world where our out sometime could just be knocking people out with commander damage in the air after we get in some of these blink loops and getting a ton of life and just basically closing out a game that way. So it's important to remember that we do want to still find some ways to have other outlets, right, to end a game. Although I think there's a lot of ways for this deck to do that, especially when we start making a large amount of mana. So speaking about a large amount of mana, here's the basic combo. This is the combo you're going to see played a lot in, well, truly any Blink deck that could play it. The classic version of this combo is Deadeye Navigator and Peregrine Drake. So for 2 mana, you can blink the Drake. The Drake comes back in, lets you untap 5-year lands. Normally, the way this combo works is, remember that you can tap a land for mana at any time. So in response to Peregrine Drake's trigger on the stack, you're gonna tap any um, lands up to 5 that you want to untap that aren't already tapped, right? So you can net that mana. Then Peregrine untaps the lands, and now you have mana floating and those lands untapped. You blink it again with Navigator, and the whole point is you want to have at least 5 lands that you're netting 3 mana every time and making just nearly infinite mana as you use on all your things. MEL does basically the same thing. The only difference is it costs 3 instead of 2. So you obviously you're gaining 1 less mana each time, but either way, you're going to gain an arbitrarily large amount of mana and be able to use that on so many things. And what you choose to use that on is up to you. I mean, we have to remember that our commander lets us go just start churning through our deck, meaning that with this combo and Atraxa out, or Sephiroth, whoever you want to look at it this way, we can get any card we want because just blinking Sephiroth or Atraxa is going to allow us to, again, look at the top 10, get things into our hand, and just start deploying them. Only thing my list probably doesn't do that I would recommend if you're going to go up to bracket 4 is play X spells like play your big X spells like Torment of Hellfire or these big spells that deal damage, Exsanguinate, things like that, things that you can dump a ton of mana to. I have Exsanguinate, I just don't have Torment of Hellfire in the list, but you could add in more of those as an outlet to take these large mana turns and just immediately crystallize them into a win instead of finding other ways to do it, although we do have other ways to do it. The second one is through a combo like Displacer Kitten into Teferi Time Raveler. So the way that this combo works is that Teferi's -3 says you can return up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand and then draw a card. But Displacer Kitten says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you can blink a permanent. Basically, what you want to do is pair this with any mana rock or specifically something like Soul Ring, where you can tap for mana, bounce it back to your hand with Teferi, play it again, and now you're getting spell cast if you have things that want spell cast. I think the most dangerous version of this combo specifically, and it's just not in here because of the budget, is the One Ring. Remember, the One Ring, when it comes in, gives you protection from everything until your next turn, taps to draw, right? Well, with this Displacer Kitten Teferi combo, Teferi can blink the One Ring back to your hand, basically allowing you to cast it every turn, giving yourself protection every turn. And effectively, as long as anybody until someone messes with the combo, you can't be damaged, you can't be attacked, you can't be targeted. You could still lose life from abilities, but you can't be damaged by, things. And it's going to be really difficult for people to get around this protection loop. Again, the only reason it's not in this version of the list is just the cost of the One Ring, but I think it's a really easy thing to add in, especially with things like Yorion and Brago that we talked about being able to blink non-land permanents. Well, now you can blink the One Ring, and you're just really taking advantage of that. The other things I want to add was you have creatures like Chupacabra that, again, can destroy creatures when it comes in. There's a great target for the bounce. You have other creatures that can draw cards when they come in. Again, great additions. The only reason I'm not going too hard on the creatures that draw when they come in is because we have our commander. Our commander is going to do way better than just drawing 2 cards. It's going to let us look at the top 10 and just couldn't pick the cards we want. So we don't need as many of the Muldrifters of the world because we have it in our commander. I'd rather focus on other creatures that do more utility-based things so that we could see them as we go through those top 10, get them in our hand, use them, and deploy them. But let's let we do what we love to do on the most on the channel. Again, to our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtests on our channel is not find magical Christmas land. It's not to show off our best plays, but it's to get in some gameplay scenarios, kind of understand what are we looking for and how we're going to set up our game plan. Here I'm looking at a 4-lander with Invasion of Zendikar. So this is a battle. When it comes in, we're going to go get 2 basic land cards of our choice and put them on the battlefield, tap, and then shuffle. Again, the important part here of the Invasion of Zendikar is you can flip it into an elemental that taps for mana. But if we can see things like Brago or Yorion, we could blink this and just continue to ramp more. My thought here is I have a 4-lander with a battle that's going to get me up to 6. So all I would need is one more land to be able to uh, cast Atraxa. We're playing the other Atraxa Praetor's Voice, pretty much the same ability line, except a 4/4 instead of 7/7. It just says beginning your end step proliferate. Now, this Atraxa is more built to be a Planeswalker or other types of commanders, but I think she's just a great body in this deck, and she's going to be a real threat, and again, can help us gain life over the course of the game. And then Phyrexian Metamorph can come in as a copy of any artifact or creature. A lot of times we want to wait on the Metamorph and have it come in as a copy of something else, but it's important to note that Metamorph could come in as a copy of our commander if we needed it to. It'd have to go away because the legendary role, but it could be a good way to get some cheap draw if we need it to be, right, digging through our library. But otherwise, I like this one. Turn 4, we can hit that ramp. Hopefully we find something before it, but otherwise it doesn't look too bad. Panharmonicon here is a really interesting example of why cards like it could be really beneficial, doubling up on artifacts or creatures entering. So Panharmonicon can't double up the Zendikar, but it could double up something like Metamorph or Atraxa. So it's important to note that that is there. Here in turn 3, we see the Farseek, which could be pretty useful. I mean, my thought is if I Farseek now and I go for this Vision of Zendikar next turn, we are going to be at Sephiroth mana on turn 5, so that seems pretty useful. The other important thing to note is that Farseek does not have to go only get basic lands. It can get any land with a typing. So looking here, I mean, I think a tri-land with blue would make the most sense. Something like Spar's Headquarters. So then as we come to this turn, I just play the land here and play the Invasion of Zendikar. Again, the point is we're going to get ourselves up to that mana we need, right? Now, like I said, we can attack the battle, and if we do, we turn it over into an elemental that can tap for mana of any color, but I kind of don't mind leaving it up just in case we have any way to blink it, right, or do something to it. I feel like it could be pretty important. So now as we come here to turn 5, we have a couple choices. We could go for something like Panharmonicon and try to double up Atraxa's ability, or we could just dump Atraxa in. And I think dumping Atraxa in makes the most sense to me. So remember, we get to look at the top 10. And it says for each card type, we get to put a card of that type from into our hand. So every card type. So lands, we see a couple lands. None of them really matter, but I guess we'll pick a dual land. So all of these are going to automatically go right back to the bottom. Now we're going to pick things like enchantment, where there's only one instant, right? There's only one in the Anguish of Making. And now we have to go for creature. We see 3. We see Galadriel, we see Elishnorn, and we see Urtai. All 3 of these are really great options. Truthfully, I'd have a hard time picking. Elishnorn's basically an even better Panharmonicon, right? Because it's just any permanent, not creature or artifacts. Galadriel's great because she could start digging through and putting counters in. Urtai's great because it's removal. I think Elishnorn to me makes the most sense, and all the rest of these are just going to go back on the bottom. Unfortunately, we're going to run into hand size issues here, right, because of the adding cards to our hand. But I think we don't mind dumping some things. If I have this, I think I'm willing to dump the Panharmonicon, even though it can be really useful to have extra copies of that doubling ability. I think Elishnorn's going to be plenty enough. Now, Atraxa Soldier is kind of an odd card, but it's really good. So it comes in as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it isn't legendary. It's an artifact and has Myriad. Myriad's an ability that says whenever that creature attacks, you make a copy of it, attacking each other opponent. So this is kind of a wacky card, and could be really interesting what we choose to do, what we choose to use it on. The obvious answer would probably be at Sephiroth, right? Just get more value every turn, because it's going to trigger when it comes in. And whenever it attacks, it's going to make 2 copies of itself, triggering again. Meaning, basically, we're just going to start churning through our deck, finding exactly what we want. So, my thought process here is as we go up, as we're trying to get up in the top end of bracket 4, Atraxa Soldier is something that's just going to allow us to find our combo even quicker, finding ways to bounce Sephiroth, finding all the pieces we need, finding the Gary, finding the whatever, however you want to do it, and just win the game that way. So, we're kind of starting to add these pieces that are going to get even better as we go up the bracket chain. And truthfully, obviously, we hope Sephiroth sticks around. If somebody removes it, which would stink, it's okay. we take another turn to set back up, and then we bring Sephiroth back in and do it again. Like, my thought here is that if Sephiroth survives, if nobody manages to remove it until my turn, I've got 9 mana. The Auton Soldier's 6. I mean, I love the idea of trying to go for like um Elishnorn plus the Metamorph onto the Sephiroth. That would have Sephiroth go off twice because of the Metamorph coming in. Um, we could do the Elishnorn and then the other Atraxa and just kind of set up for next turn, right? And then do the Auton Soldier, or we could just straight up do the Auton Soldier this turn. It would trigger Sephiroth to go off, right? Because it comes in as a copy of Sephiroth. We get to look through the top 10 again. Maybe we end up getting a land. I mean, we'll see what we can find our way into. I mean, the hope would be we find things like Deadeye Navigator or things like that. And the important part is, even if we don't find the Peregrine Drake off this, but we find the Deadeye Navigator or the Emiel, remember that we can blink Sephiroth to get into those things, right? Effectively, Sephiroth is a great blink target for us because it's just going to continue to let us churn through our deck and find those pieces. And so for that reason, this deck should pretty easily be able to find whatever win con you want to stuff into it. Well, let's get into playtest number 2 here. Keeping a 3-lander with Bloom Tender. Bloom Tender is a mana dork that adds a mana for each color among permanents you control. So, of course, just by itself, it would be green. But we see some options. Reflector Mage could add some extra mana. Elishnorn can add another color. Blind Obedience can add another color. Note that Bloom Tender doesn't say creatures, it says permanents. So even just Blind Obedience could help us out. Notably, no black mana just yet. So we'll need that by the time we get to 7. But I'm not worried about it. We have plenty of ways to ramp in the deck. We have plenty of other things. Well, there we go. We fixed it turn 1 by getting our Sultai Triumph, so we're good to go there. Turn 2, we need to put down an untapped land to go for Bloom Tender. Turn 3, I like the Commander Sphere, and then my thought is just go with the Blind Obedience. This way we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right now. And then Deserted Beach would mean that next turn, turn 4, we could be at Sephiroth as long as no one removes Bloom Tender. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, all 4 of our colors. 1, 2, 3. And there would be Sephiroth, right? So this is a turn 4 Sephiroth for us because of our fixing. And we get to go deep and find all the things we want. So let's see what we get access to. Remember, 10 cards is a rough draw here. So we have an option of a couple lands. The Swamp or the Path. I guess I'll just go for the Path since it has the most flexibility. Sorcery, I see 3 visits, I see a Farseek, and I see a Reanimate. My gut almost wants the Reanimate just in case someone removes Sephiroth. Like if they destroy it, maybe we put it back in the graveyard instead of throwing it back in the zone. We get the battle, we get the creature, and then Soaring versus Chromatic Lander. Chromatic Lander turns all of our lands into any color. Soaring just adds the mana. I mean, either way, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really matter, right? Because I think we have more than enough. But I guess I'll just take the Soaring. And then we have to discard down to hand size, which kind of stinks, but it's fine. Remember, we have the Reanimate, so we could, just pitch something like Elishnorn and immediately get the Reanimate for it back next turn, right? Which could be pretty useful. Nice thing now is Bloom Tender is tapping for 4, right? Because we have 4 colors among all of our permanents. My thought here is what? Reanimate Elishnorn. As long as nobody's taken out Sephiroth, I would probably just reanimate Elishnorn. I've got 4, 8, 9, 3, 7, 8, 9, 10 mana. So we got lots of mana. Yorin could be interesting. We could go for Reflector Mage. We could my almost thought here is Yurok plus the Evasion of Zendikar, just because now this Zendikar is going to go off 3 times. 1 because of Yurok extra and 1 because of Elishnorn extra, basically just allowing us to go get 6 basic lands. My thought here is we're just going to bankroll, right, the rest of the game, going and getting, right, more than enough that we're going to need to keep, partying and having fun. And the other thought here is this thins our deck out, right? To hopefully, if we can, find a way to blink Sephiroth or something like that, or if somebody removes it, we play it again. We're just churning through for value. Sephiroth can attack this turn. We used all of our mana, which is perfectly fine. If we want to flip this over, we can, but I honestly would probably you could leave it up if you want to. We have most of the basic lands in our deck. If I recall correctly, we either have 10 or 11 basic lands. So we're at 8, 9 scene of I think either 11 or 12. So it may be a better idea to flip this over now, knowing that. But now Sephiroth is a threat, and literally now all we need to do is try to find a way to get some more cards in our hand. Which remember, one of the easiest ways to do that is Sephiroth. Um, but right now, the only way I have to blink Sephiroth is Yorion. So we would need to try to find another way to do it. Um, which again, we can just try to dig through some more. But I mean, worst case scenario, we just exile Yorion, right, and then have it come back in, or exile Sephiroth, and it's going to come back in, and again, it's going to go off 3 times. Pretty much just letting us churn through our library 3 times, right? I think we're going to pretty much probably find whatever we want, and we have more than enough mana now. Even if somebody were to return all non-land permanents back to hand, we've got, what, 11 mana? More than enough to get things redeployed and probably just easily sail us through. My thought process here is I don't think I need to show the line because the line could be whatever you want it to be. The point is blinking Sephiroth and having it come back in, letting you churn through the top, 10 3 times is going to find you nearly whatever you want it to. And even if, let's say it doesn't, it only finds you one piece, you do it again next turn, or you find another way to blink Sephiroth immediately, right? And now you're just churning through value and finding everything you need. And importantly, right, if you, as we go up to bracket 4, you're adding the Torment of Hellfires, you're adding the Exsanguinates, you have like Debt to the Deathless, which uh, hurts the life. You have things like Mind Grind you can add to start milling your opponents out. Like there's so many X spells, Villainous Wealth. There's so many things you can do to just take this mana combo and just blow it out of the water that are all going to be findable off of Sephiroth's ability, right? But let's go one more time. Here we're looking at a 3-lander with birds, so a good way to get access to all of our colors. Soul Ring, there's the Coiling Oracle, and Teleportation Circle. So Teleportation Circle could start blinking Coiling to start, which isn't bad. I'm trying to think. Does it make sense to go straight for birds, or does it make sense to go straight for Soaring? I guess we're going to have some tap lands at the moment, so let's do that. I do the Triumph and the Soaring. I could now cultivate, right? This pays for this 2 and 3. My thought here on the cultivate is now this is going to come in untapped, and that will too, and then we could potentially take a bigger turn next turn, hopefully getting some more value on the board that forced took into our hand. So as we come to this turn, I've got 4, 5, 6, 7 mana, so we could go for Sephiroth. My thought is, yeah, playing that, play the Circle, play the Coiling Oracle. That's not a land, so it's going to go to our hand. And then now, right, on end step, blink the Coiling Oracle. That's going to go to our hand. So now we're feeding things into our hand. And it's going to be now easier, right, to start churning through our deck even more. There we'll play the Triumph. I've got 4, 5, 6, 7. So I do have enough for Sephiroth if I want to do that. I'm just worried that it's going to end up forcing me to discard cards. But I guess I can always discard the lands, right? That's always an option. I could get Emil and blink the Oracle, but I think it's probably worth just going for Sephiroth here. Yeah, it's what our deck wants to do, right? Just start freely looking at the top of our deck. We're seeing a lot of lands on this one. So it's of course always nice when you see things like Amanatu because she's the only planeswalker in our deck. So that's that. This is our only enchantment. This is our only instant. This is our only sorcery. And I'll go with something like the Spar's Headquarters just to give us the most access to all of our colors there. Going to end step. Right, just nuke the basic lands. I love the idea of Blind Obedience. It's just because you can extort it. You can start extorting your spells for huge, life swings there. But I think that's the option. End step, I'll blink the Oracle. And we'll pitch the Deserted Beach. And then as we come back to our turn, Nature's Rhythm can help us go find any creature we want in our deck, so that's an option. Um, the question is, what do we do? I mean, we will probably, I imagine we'll probably circle Sephiroth this turn. So what? That gives me 5 mana. I could go digging again, just a ramp, right? Get more things on the battlefield, get more mana out there for future turns. Since literally now the only thing probably in our way is probably just the mana, right? Because we have a way to blink Sephiroth. We also have a way to blink multiple times, right? With Emio the Blessed, as long as we could find the mana. I think that leaves us like probably just enough planning to play Amanatu if we want. I guess I'll go for the Coiling Oracle. Put that to hand. I think that might leave us enough mana up for the Ephemerate if I was either wrong or right, depending on my count. Otherwise, instead, I probably just blink Sephiroth again. Just try to dig. And now again, we're digging for the pieces. If we don't find the pieces, it's fine because then we could just dig further. But here, this is kind of huge. We see the Panharmonicon doubling up things. We see Corpse Knight. Here's a way to start hurting our opponents. So my thought is something like this. We could trade the Corpse Knight out for Yorn if we want to, but my thought is something like this. Again, we have the Panharmonicon plus the Corpse Knight. So if we can get our way into this mana right, combo, then we're good to go. And we already have a half of it. Literally, all we're looking for is Peregrine Drake. And remember, we have the Nature's Rhythm, so we can go find the Peregrine Drake exactly. We're here. We have the combo. I know it's to some people they don't love combo decks, but truthfully, like combo decks are going to be important for certain people who want to play them. I think with this many colors, it's very easy to pretty much pick your combos and find them. As you go up into bracket 4, you'll be playing more tutors, things like that. And again, you can kind of just do what you want. That's what makes Atraxa a difficult commander in a lot of ways to deal with, because it just generates so much value. Even if you kill it immediately when it enters, they still look through the top 10. They got so much value into their hand. But let me know what you think of Sephiroth, aka Atraxa, down in the comment section below, and I will catch you on the next one.